Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. This is going to be my in-depth breakdown for Netflix Avatar Episode 8, the finale of Book 1 episode, that is N108, Legends. I'll still have a few other videos to come out. At the very least, I'll have a video kind of summing up my thoughts that I covered in my live stream about what I want from Book 2. I might do a kind of final thoughts in general video on Netflix Avatar. Not sure about that one. Maybe if there's some demand for it, I might do that. And otherwise, it'll just be the podcast episode reviews, which will happen over the course of the next kind of couple of months, of course. So, jumping in here with general thoughts, it's definitely the better of the two finale kind of Northern Water Tribe episodes by a long shot, because I do think 107 is on the weaker side of the overall episodes. It is broadly accurate to the original, but I do think there are lots of little changes, cuts from the original that do take away some things. There are also some of the additions like Karuk's knife, which I think overly complicate the situation, and it just feels like they put a little bit too much thought into trying to like correct or fix or improve, that they almost underthought how to just accurately and solidly do the basic content of some of these episodes. Also, as we're now at the end, it becomes super apparent how much better written Zuko is in the live action show compared to like the Team Avatar characters. I do think Sokka comes out pretty alright, where his arc, I think at least, is covered in a nice enough way across the episodes. Even if it's not like amazing, it stands out as being a lot better than Katara and Aang's arcs, which I find to just be very messy, but also mainly repetitive. That it's just the same thing in every episode with Aang, and basically the same with Katara. And especially because Katara is kind of in focus here in the Water Tribe, her arc just doesn't come together, I think, properly with the way they do some of the changes. But I think we have to get through the scenes here to talk about a lot of this stuff. So, jumping into the recap here, we start off with the initial kind of like basically Team Avatar taking down a Fire Nation scout ship. It's pretty nice. It's accurate. It's nice to see the team just taking something out with relative ease. Sokka being the leader, Katara being very comfortable, kind of setting up the idea that she has achieved a pretty strong level. But of course, we get the idea that as they leave, they see that this is one ship of a giant armada, and there's no way them plus the Northern Water Tribe can take out them all. So there's no point going on the offense. They're going to have to be defensive is basically the idea. So solid opening scene leading into this kind of nice Zuko and Iroh scene here, which is obviously Zuko doing the risky play, walking into the tribe, of course, without really having a plan. But Iroh gives him the best advice that he can, knowing that he's going to go through with it anyway, of course. Zuko does mention Luten and says, he would have been proud of you. And we get the kind of hug scene here and remember your breath of fire. Interestingly, they don't quite do this in the same way as the original, where like Iroh says, like kind of like, I think of you as a son. Which is kind of an interesting choice in that, like, I think it would have worked if they had done it. I wonder kind of why they didn't do that, when actually this dynamic is probably one of the best done ones in the live action. But solid stuff here. This is where we realize that we're going to have to be defensive and try and weather the storm of the Fire Nation attack rather than, counter-attacking, basically. Chances are still very low, but Katara says that she can help to even the odds, and this is the setup for the kind of female waterbenders kind of little plot that we have. But we then move on. So this scene is obviously all about introducing the unique way we're going to use the war balloon here, because we have it introduced much earlier. In the original, of course, it's properly introduced in episode 17, and then is properly utilized in like the mid-season finale of book 3. Whereas here, it was introduced in like episode 3, but now we're using it here in the book 1 finale. So it'll be interesting to see if air power gets brought up in book 2, or do we just wait to again use it properly in a big way at the like eclipse battle. when that whole thing happens. And so the idea here is that Zhao basically reveals that this is going to be very helpful for them to avoid the defenses going in over the top, because the Fire Nation, of course, are not known for air power, but also Zhao has some other plan that he has yet to relay to Iroh. So that's the kind of whole point here. And again, it's pretty solid so far. This is when we introduce the idea of Aang and the other waterbenders defending the tribe by taking out the incoming fireballs. Katara at this point is where she really confronts Pakku about the whole idea of, you need to let me fight. Why won't you let me fight? You have to accept that, we all want to defend the tribe here. Let us do it. Even Yagoda kind of comes in here and defends kind of Katara's point, saying that Pakku is the one who needs to change. And he reluctantly says that you guys can go defend the western side of the wall. So I do still maintain, if they had just done episode 7 more accurately to the original by doing the whole Grand necklace kind of scene, and that being the turning point for Pakku, and so he actually just listens to Katara as we head into this episode, would have been better, rather than in the middle of the battle he's still stuck in his old ways and they almost have to waste time preparing for the attack, arguing with him. It's just not as smooth as it needs to be, and unfortunately Pakku doesn't quite get the development or focus that he gets in the original. That Gran, I think, point with the necklace really adds a lot of nuance to the character that shapes how you, I think, perceive him going forward. And taking that away, I think just makes him an overly simplistic character in my mind. Then we get into Han here, who, I have to say, coming out of the 2 finale episodes, he is probably one of the better changes in the entire show. I think it was a really good move to change Han completely from being one of the most dislikable characters to being this actually incredibly charismatic and likable warrior. In a way, this is the warrior, in a way, who kind of Sokka strives to be, but clearly, isn't. But Sokka works in so many different ways as well, and that they're actually friends, and taking away a lot of the sort of drama elements around Han actually helps Sokka's arc to, I think, flow a little bit better, and it makes Han, I think, almost stand out more as a character with what they do here. Just getting to characterize a non-bender warrior within the tribe actually just works really well here, because we set up the idea here of his chief is you're the first line of defense. You're going to lead the warriors when the Fire Nation eventually come through. If they breach the walls, it's on you, basically. And so, he can step up. He is the leader of the warriors, Han, and that's a cool little plot point for him. He only gets a couple of scenes, but he works in them, and I think he ends up coming out standing as a more interesting character than I think in the original, which is actually, I think, quite interesting. But this is also where Arnuk asks Sokka to protect Yue during the battle, which is pretty nice. This is where we get the scene of the women doing their defensive kind of waterbending to block a fireball. But then we also see the waterbender trainees, the kind of boys, are sent over to Katara. She's in charge of them, in command of them for the battle, and she gives them orders. And one of them calls Katara Master Katara. So this is the start of this little kind of plot thread here, which I don't particularly like. I'm not going to say I hate it, but it's just the idea of Katara already has a pretty quick training arc in the original. You didn't need to change this. Just quite simply, this is a pointless change. You meddled with something you really didn't need to. It works out in Katara's favor in the original that she does get training from Pakku, because this show, especially this live action version, just has a weird relationship with training overall, where the Azula stuff, the training is pretty badly presented in terms of what they're trying to get across. Katara doesn't train. Aang never trains waterbending in this book. It's there's a real aversion to training, whether it be just not showing it, or in the case of Katara here, choosing to not have her train except her own training on her literally just on her own, with minor assistance early on from Aang about just general bending. I just think ignoring the idea of the importance of having a master is a little bit of a silly concept to me. and it doesn't benefit her arc that this is the case. It takes away from it because there's nuance to the idea that Katara comes around enough to still be trained by Pakku and come out better from that training in the end, because both characters have grown past their initial kind of feud, basically, from the previous episode to, no, she's a really good apprentice, and Pakku is a good master. He is able to train people well, and it works, and they just seem to just want to avoid doing that. And I don't think there's that much benefit to really highlighting that Katara is a kind of self-made master necessarily. It just takes away opportunity for character growth for her, in my mind. But the next scene is where we go into some of the changes with like some of the lore aspects, because of course in this version it doesn't seem like Zhao has ever been to Wan Shi Tong's library, so instead the Great Sage explains some of the spiritual stuff to him. So the initial thing we get here is that the full moon is out. Iroh's like, hey, pause the attack because the waterbenders are more powerful during the moon. But Zhao is actually like, no, this is actually the rare ice moon, which is a rare cosmic event where the barriers between the worlds grows thin. And what this means, as we learn here, is that basically this will be a specific day where the moon and ocean spirit will actually be in physical, like mortal form here. And this offers a chance to kill them. And so that's basically what the setup is here. We do also get some of the like origin story on the water tribes about how, you know, the capital is basically built on top of the spirit oasis, and that's effectively where, you know, it sprung up from, is this great kind of natural area. This is why it's built around that. And then we get the idea that the life of the waterbenders kind of comes from the ocean spirit, and the bending power comes from the moon spirit. And so that's the setup here. The other point is that the Karuk's knife comes into play at this point, and I just think, once again, this is such a needless and pointless change because they don't even explain it properly. Because the idea here is that this knife is special because it can kill spirits. But you've just explained with the rest of your kind of different explanation that, again, this is different from the original, because in the original, Tui and La are just always there in the pond. Like there's never a specific time when they come out. No, they crossed over at the beginning of time to become basically a part of the physical world. This is why there is such a big connection between the spirit and like the moon, and the spirit and the ocean, is that they did come over near the beginning. Otherwise the world would turn out very, very different. So in that sense, it makes a bit more sense the way it's done in the original than just they happen to like literally every so often become mortal for a day is kind of a bit of a weird one. Just to kind of try and overly create a specific circumstance for no real reason. It's a bit weird. But then the knife stuff, they never go into the details about like, why is this knife really that different than any other knife? Sure, in a scene coming up, I think it's the next scene, they will explain it is made out of spirit materials, but they don't say why that then means it is a better knife for killing spirits than anything else, other than that, I guess, if you need spiritual energy involved to kill a spirit. But they don't say that again. So they're not specific enough about the knife to justify its inclusion. Otherwise, it's like, just keep it up to here, ignore the knife, and any knife or any firebending attack can kill the spirit because they're in a mortal form. Because the other point that they don't explain, which the knife would explain, is the idea of spirits and the fact that when they are destroyed, they just change form. That it is actually very difficult to permanently kill a spirit, whereas in canon, the only real ways that we know how to do it would be like dark spirit bending, basically. So the knife is obviously the implication of it is that it permanently kills a spirit. But once again, they don't say that. So the information we are presented is not enough information to explain what's going on here. They have overcomplicated a plot point that they didn't need to overcomplicate. Because the Karuk knife thing adds nothing to the story, basically. As we see here, Karuk appears before Aang and tells him that, like, my knife is near, I can sense it. It's made from materials from the spirit world. And we do this weird thing where Karuk is like, and that means one thing only, as we cut to Zhao explaining to Iroh, with the implication being that Karuk is effectively saying the same thing to Aang, and that is that my knife being near means someone is planning to use the knife to kill the ocean and the moon spirit. But they never actually, again, explain why the knife specifically is suited to killing spirits, other than, I guess, you know, you can connect the dots and be like, well, Karuk, the spirit hunter character, I guess, used his knife to kill spirits quite a lot. But without explaining the significance of that, it's like, really? The Avatar can only kill spirits using a knife? His bending and Avatar state abilities don't matter. He needed to use a knife to do it. Like, there's so many like weird implications of the knife being this major plot point that it just makes me think like, you overthought this, didn't you? You absolutely tied yourself into knots trying to overthink this situation when you didn't need to do it. Like, the original, the movie, made these points clearer, whereas you so overcomplicated it for no reason. So yeah, Zhao does explain in this scene though that yeah, I'm not a monster. I'm not going to kill the ocean spirit. I don't want to like be the person who has killed everyone from the water tribes. I'm just going to kill the moon spirit to take away their bending. Karuk does explain that this will throw the world out of balance, like completely, so this needs to be stopped. The Avatar is powerful, but nowhere near as powerful as the power of the elemental spirits. So that's an interesting classification that I guess it puts the moon and ocean spirit into this category of effectively like water elemental spirits, but we don't really know the details surrounding like elemental spirits of any other element, like air spirits. We've heard stuff about earth spirits, but I don't think we've ever properly gone into the details on them, and that like there's a pretty rock kind of golem spirit in the Korra comics. Is that an earth spirit? It doesn't seem this level of powerful. You know, fire spirits, stuff like that. Like we don't really know what the situation is there. So interesting one. Then we get this interesting scene with Momo. Momo saves a little girl's life, but is effectively kind of borderline fatally wounded by this chunk of rock kind of falling on him. And so Sokka and Yue rush to bring him to the Spirit Oasis to save Momo's life. The Spirit Oasis, by the way, does look very cool. They emphasize it like a lot more, that it's this whole area that, yes, the city has been built on top of, basically. Which is kind of cool. But yeah, at the actual oasis kind of pond itself, Yue uses her waterbending healing to heal Momo. It's a nice little moment. Sokka's very happy to see Momo back, but it very much highlights that, oh yeah, what was the last time like Momo was in a scene? Like, was he in the last episode? I don't really remember. He probably was when they arrived at the tribe, but like it highlights how little like Appa and Momo get used. That Appa's last scene is effectively the opening scene of this episode. This is effectively Momo's last scene. At least we got to see them for a little bit, but it definitely brings up the whole CG budget kind of issue and how much they could or couldn't be used, whereas in the animation, they just had Momo in random scenes all over the place. Appa was here when absolutely needed, when you worry going into like book 2 that like, you can't do Appa's Lost Days. Were you ever going to do it fully in the first place? But you probably can't do it just because having a whole episode focused on a CG animal character is probably just too much of a CG budget issue to do. So the limitations of this show become sort of clear in situations like that. But we'll get to Koizilla and what that does or not doesn't do. Zuko gets into the tribe, of course, using his firebending, which is kind of cool. We just get a quick scene of Sokka realizing, oh, they've used the balloon to get in, and I helped to design it. So he kind of blames himself a little bit there. A difference in this version is, of course, Zhao doesn't actually know what form the spirits are, whereas that was the main information he had in the first place in the original. So that's an interesting one. And he wants Iroh to help him find them, which I believe is the first time we've really mentioned the idea that Iroh is spiritual in nature, other than him being cautious about doing anything with the spirits. Him just directly saying that, like, oh, you know about spiritual stuff, Iroh, is the first kind of reveal of that. Then we get Zuko confronting Aang and Katara, which I actually kind of like because Aang is so confident in Katara, and it's this big moment for her where she's finally at the level to where she can face Zuko one-on-one, when in previous episodes she wasn't quite there yet. If her training was done better, if she had actually trained under Pakku and done it like the original, I think it works super well, because you get the line, you know, like, oh, you found a master, haven't you? Yes. But here it's like, yes, I'm my own master, and it's just like, no, that doesn't work. Come on, be better than that. But yeah, the fight itself is actually quite dynamic. Some of the fights in this show can be a little bit slow, but no, this is actually quite acrobatic on both characters' part. And you can tell, I think they put a lot of effort into this one, because it's like two main characters fighting. It's fire versus water. So it ends with, of course, Katara encasing Zuko in ice, but he breaks free of it using his breath of fire. So bit of a kind of stalemate here, as the rest of the plot's about to kind of come into play here in a big way. So yeah, here are Tui and La, the ocean moon spirit, as koi fish, of course. Yeah, here's the red effect when the moon spirit is taken out of the water. And yeah, that's basically what we get here. Iroh warns Zhao of like, I'll inflict on you tenfold what you do to the spirit, basically. We'll see the result of that in a second. It's not great. But yeah, Zhao's ambition comes across very well here, as he gives himself the Moonslayer title, that like, hey, if you join me, Iroh, like, it'll stand good to me that like I basically have a member of the royal family supporting my bid to be like the next Fire Lord. Like, he's acting like he's more ambitious, he's better than Ozai is. Like, it's really gotten to his head here. But yeah, Aang then kind of jumps out to kind of confront Zhao about this. Zhao's about to kill the spirit with the knife. The conversation's kind of interesting here. Like, Zhao asks Aang, you know, like, you don't know what it's like to, like, you know, lose a whole race of benders, but Aang actually does, of course, because of what happened to his people. He'll do anything to prevent this, and he talks about how he's failed as the Avatar, kind of to a certain degree, like, I'm not really part of this world, like, I was born 100 years ago, am I really like part of things here? Iroh kind of surprise attacks Zhao, and in the chaos, like, the knife falls, the spirit falls, but because Zhao is right there, he is able to scramble and just about stab the spirit on the ground, as we see here. So yes, the moon spirit does in fact get killed by Karuk's knife. There's no like effect on the knife here hitting the spirit. It's just like, again, could this not have been done with any other knife? Could this not have been done with just firebending? After all the build-up of the knife, it's just like, it works exactly like a knife, and it doesn't seem to do anything special, because there's no extra details that they go into about it. So, again, overcomplicated plot point. So yeah, the moon goes dark at this point, waterbending is gone. They highlight that the tribe is basically about to fall here, because this is when the walls are breached, and it's at the worst possible moment. It means the non-bender warriors are going to have to do everything pretty much all on their own, because the waterbenders are, it's not just that they've lost their bending, but like, they're weakened by this. They've lost a power that like is part of them. That's the point that's being made here. We see, of course, Katara lose her bending in the next scene, but then we see Kyoshi's vision kind of come true, as Katara is effectively saved from losing to Zuko by the fireball hitting the room that they're kind of fighting in, and bringing down the building here. So that's a cool little connection here of just highlighting that this could not have been prevented. That fireball was always going to hit this building, but the result of the battle overall, that was the point that Karuk was making to Aang. That's not set in stone. Then we get to Han's big moment, and I think they do this really well for like a minor character, and again, a very changed minor character in this version of the show. This works. I like that they let the non-bender warriors have this last stand moment to protect the chief, protecting Chief Arnook. They cover his retreat. There's a nice little moment between Han and Arnook, kind of acknowledging the sacrifice, the expected sacrifice here. And yeah, we see like Han gets his own like, we don't see him fall, but the implication as we cut away from the scene is that he can't last that much longer, but he's fighting well against all these kind of Fire Nation soldiers coming in over the wall. It's a cool scene, as just like it shows how skilled he is. He is a true warrior. All of these kind of points here. So, pretty top marks to the Han stuff. Overall, it's a good change. And then we get into some of the bigger moments here. So first of all, just to specifically highlight that, yes, Iroh's unleashing tenfold on Zhao is just like 3 basic firebending attacks. It's not really impressive at all. When in the original, this is impressive because Iroh just jumps in amongst all of Zhao's guards and just boom, 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 takes them out. It's really quick, and you can see the power in the way his bending is differently than other times we've seen it. Even in the movie, this scene is good because you see Iroh generate his own fire, which is a super rare ability in the kind of movie universe with the way they've done some of the changes. So it's made into this huge moment of like people who can't do that, seeing Iroh do something that they've pretty much not seen many benders ever do before. And so unfortunately, yeah, of the 3 depictions of this scene, this version is by far and away the worst in terms of Iroh's big moment here. He makes Zhao still run away, but it's like, okay, that wasn't great. But yes, this is the build up to Koizilla, of course. So Aang steps up, walks into the Oasis, goes into the Avatar state. We get the "it's not over" in the Avatar state voice. He merges with the ocean spirit, forms Koizilla, which of course is this beast monster of pure vengeance. And they really double down, they triple down on this as a plot point with Koizilla. This was present in the original, but they never emphasized it as being this thing where like Aang is now lost to the vengeance of the ocean spirit. It's like it was this kind of merger that you always felt that like Aang will come out of this eventually. Here they kind of create more of a plot point around it that like Yue and Iroh seem to sort of know the idea that Aang might not be able to come back from this because the ocean spirit's anger will last forever because the moon is gone. And so what will ever quell this anger? This is a spirit. It's not a person. It won't diminish over time. We might not see the return of the Avatar from this kind of spirit combination type thing. So interesting that they do that to create even more drama in the scene here. Iroh, of course, finds Zuko. Everyone's terrified of Koizilla. The fight begins as Katara wakes up and, of course, spots Aang inside Koizilla, and of course is very worried about like him losing himself in all of this, basically. So that's the setup there. Then we get Zuko versus Zhao, which is one of these situations where I think what actually happens here is mostly pretty well done, but it would have been better if they had just done it more accurately to the original. If you had the Zuko, Zhao, Agni, Kai, and just had them at each other's throats for like the entire season. And that's why it works in the original, is because they come to blows within the first episode. So encounters as we go through the season are all the more impactful because they hate each other from that point. In this version, they tried to build up to this fight here in the Water Tribe is the fight, finishing up their kind of rivalry with each other. And some of it's good, but it would have been of benefit to the show to have more going on as well. So, of course, Zuko wins the fight. It's decent, but it could have been maybe a little bit longer, a little bit more dynamic, but still, it's fine. Zuko does blame Zhao for ruining his mission, but this is the actual good stuff with Zhao here, is that Zhao reveals that Zuko's banishment mission basically has always been a sham. Ozai was never planning to take you back, no matter how well you did or didn't do on this mission. It was all just a game for him. He was just using this and whatever you did on this mission to try and force Azula, the winner of the siblings, basically, and using Zuko to be as motivation to make Azula stronger. He also reveals that basically Azula is the reason I got this far and was able to get so much of an advantage, have so much information on you, is that she was supporting me from behind the scenes the whole time. And of course, Zuko's furious about this because this is meant to be the replacement for effectively like the whole she was born lucky, I was lucky to be born. That doesn't happen here because the plot point of like Zuko carrying Aang into the wilderness doesn't happen here. So instead we get the Zuko Azula rivalry more presented on Zuko's side of things through Zhao revealing that the person who's got in your way throughout this entire book has been Azula. And even though everyone knows your mission is a sham, she still supported me to mess with you the whole time through. And it's just this idea of this reveal has shattered like Zuko's like hope. Now all of a sudden his banishment is just a permanent thing. There's no hope for restoring his honor or anything like that, getting back. And to still know that like Azula just further wants to make him go further down. It's just this devastating moment for Zuko. So it's just this weird one where like this arc could have been better, but it builds to this moment that's actually like pretty good. Like I would say it's actually a success of the live action. The Azula supporting Zhao plot point is definitely thumbs up from me. Then the ending of this is that Zuko gets up, he's lost in his thoughts, he turns his back to Zhao. Zhao's about to kill him with this kind of fire whip style thing. And then just out of nowhere, it's like Iroh just kills Zhao, just fires straight to the back and he falls into the water and it seems like Zhao is dead. So we follow this amazing scene up with like, what a waste. Like, because Iroh just randomly killing Zhao takes away the ocean spirit getting vengeance on the person who actually killed the moon spirit. The moment of the ocean spirit pulling Zhao away as Zuko, who's furious at Zhao, tries to reach out to sort of like help him is an amazing moment. And it's just, I can't believe they took away the idea of Zhao, who loses himself to his ambitions and his arrogance and messes with the spirits, so much so that he gets smited basically by a spirit. Why did you take that away? That's so weird to just randomly casually be like, oh yeah, Iroh kills him. No, there's a huge importance because the rage of the ocean spirit effectively is directed mostly towards Zhao as the person who did this, and to just ignore that is, were you thinking? Were the writers thinking about any of this as this is going on? That, again, they put the time and effort into their new plot point of Azula and Zhao kind of working together, but then the actual plot point of like Zhao's main thing, he's the Moonslayer, blank, nothing. So questionable. Like, why did that happen? Like, it's a real big problem, I think, that there is just this lack of logic, and where they sort of seem to put their sort of like A-team on the writing versus sometimes it just feels like no attention is given to the details of what's going on in the plot. But from there we go into Koizilla actually on the attack and the main CG like 5-minute sequence with Koizilla. It's cool, but is it worth the amount of CG budget they had to have used creating this crazy scene? In interviews, they said this is something they felt they had to do. They had to include Koizilla regardless of what the cost elsewhere would have been. In my mind, it maybe is just a little long. Because of how slow moving and kind of lumbering Koizilla is, it does make some of the scenes take a little bit longer than they need to. Like it feels like Koizilla is getting pummeled a bit too much by too many fire attacks before it actually does any damage. And I think just some slight adjustments of just making the scenes a bit more like to the point, making Koizilla move a little bit quicker, but not like too quick. I understand you want to create the idea of the power has to come through somewhat slowly, and you can't have it move too quickly, but it does feel a little bit like you're just taking eternity for it even to move slightly to the side, and stuff like that. And that's the only thing that I'd really criticize with this, because overall the design of Koizilla, like look at this scene right as the wave is about to come in. Some of it does look really, really nice, and the giant wave that effectively brings the battle to an end is really cool. I love the double fist kind of like ground pound on the ocean surface, and that's just what creates the devastating wave. It's a big scene. This then brings us into like the fight's over at this point. The fleet has been defeated. The Fire Nation can't come back from this, and so the question now is about how do we get Aang out of the rage of the ocean spirit? Is there a way to fix what happened with the moon spirit? So Katara tries to get through to Aang, saying that, the fight is over. We cut to Yue explaining to Sokka that the anger of the ocean spirit will never cease. It will look forever for its partner, now merged with Aang. And this is why there's the real fear about Aang never coming out of this, is that the spirit is so focused on the loss of the moon spirit. If the moon spirit can't come back, there's no talking to Aang. Yue realizes that there is only one way to fix this, so she kisses Sokka, water bends him to the ground so she can, unrestricted, she's planning to give the life that she was given when she was born back to the moon spirit to save it. And that's what's going to happen here. And I do like that she gives this other explanation of the idea of do you know why the ocean and moon spirit choose to take on a physical form for just one night? It's because they want to know what it's like to be alive. And that's why they kind of have the roles that they have in the physical world. It's a nice enough explanation. Again, I think the original is perfectly fine. I don't feel you needed to add this in, but it's fine overall. The only thing I'd say about Katara talking to Aang is just that they've made it clear enough that the ocean spirit is in charge here. So Katara trying to talk to Aang is just going nowhere. It's not accomplishing anything, and they're explaining it in a way where it's clear that nothing is being accomplished. And it does feel like they get a little bit confused here between the idea of this scene is actually ultimately about the ocean spirit. The ocean spirit is the one you're trying to calm down. But even after we do that, they still feel no. Katara still needs to convince Aang, because we've kind of set up this weird arc where Aang feels like he's not part of the world, and I don't think this has been set up well enough, and it's you don't need to do this. Not every episode needs to have this Aang's responsibility as the Avatar plot point. Let this plot point be the ocean spirit's moment. That he, when he sees that the moon spirit is back, puts Aang down, and that's the resolution to the plot. It's you don't have to overcomplicate it. It's right there. And it's just sometimes they seem to look at some of these scenes and feel like they want to meddle when they don't need to meddle with the writing. And it's just do it accurately to the original. Because you can do it. There are certain points in this show across the episodes where they have just done stuff accurately. I don't know why they don't do it more regularly. It's weird. But yeah, then we get Yue's sacrifice, the return of the moon. So we do get the point where she says, he is her family. This is his world. She's trying to really convince him, but obviously it isn't getting through. This is where Yue, of course, gives her life force to the koi fish, sacrificing herself to bring back the moon spirit, which is mostly nicely done, but I really don't like that they took away the fact that Sokka visually did get to see that basically Yue became the moon spirit, whereas in this version of it, it does feel like it's just she gave back energy to the fish, and the fish has been what's been revived. And this is where I was kind of half maybe expecting them to do something where, because she is giving her part of the moon spirit energy back to it, that shouldn't the new moon spirit be the fox form? That's her spirit form, because it's kind of her. And that would be a kind of cool way to do it, of that's the new moon spirit's physical form. But no, it's just the fish is revived, and they don't kind of come back around to Yue because they did the kiss before she sacrificed herself. Whereas, of course, in the other version, she sacrificed herself, and then the kiss happens kind of as she makes the sacrifice, as the kind of goodbye moment. And it just feels like, come on, make Yue feel important. I would have really liked to have seen her in some sort of a spirit form. Maybe even like if they did some sort of thing where it looks like her, but there's elements of the fox kind of going on because she has maybe a new form as the moon spirit. They could come back to it and explain it to us, but obviously the point here is that they don't actually show us it, obviously, except that, of course, the moon itself is back. But it does feel like the koi fish, of course, is just the main thing here. And then, yeah, it's this whole idea of, like, here we see the ocean spirit looks and see that the moon is back. Aang looks and sees that the moon is back. And there's still this idea of, even though this effectively resolves the plot point that we're dealing with right now, we still need to have Katara talk to Aang to get him out of the Avatar state. And it's like, okay, this is a nice enough moment. It's like, it's one of the moments where it feels like, okay, some heavy emotion coming out of Katara, one of the few times we're getting to see that. I do like that it's like, the world needs you, Aang. I need you, Aang. I like that, the more kind of personal idea here of them, in a way, trying to make up for the fact that the Gyatso getting him out of the Avatar state moment didn't really feature the kind of connection from Katara. And so they're trying to put it here. But the problem is that this is more of Aang stepping up as the Avatar to do his duty to the spirits. His kind of emotional connection to this situation in terms of what's keeping him in the Avatar state, I just think that arc isn't clear enough to make this arc hit in the way that it needs to. Like, her saying this is nice, but then the result is just that, like, well, yeah, the plot's already been resolved though. Like, the ocean spirit has its partner back. It lets Aang go. Aang's now in the Avatar state and smiles at Katara because there's no issue anymore. And it's like, this plot works if Katara says what she says or doesn't say what she says. And that's the kind of weirdness about this one, is that it does feel like Katara put in a lot of emotion to talk to Aang, but how much of it actually got through to him because of what was actually going on? It's just like, come on, think about it a little bit more. Especially when you're overthinking certain scenes, why aren't you thinking about other scenes enough? There's just some weird points like that. Then we get to the aftermath of the battle. We see that the tribe, of course, can see how much devastation there's been, the death, the destruction. We see that the young waterbending student who called Katara Master has died. Han has died. Yue, of course, has died. And many others that we didn't, of course, focus on. And of course, Aang, seeing this, feels that he's failed once again because, you know, success for him is like saving everyone, whereas they convince him in the later scene that, like, this is what happens when there is a war going on. You can't save absolutely everything, but we are doing the right thing. You have to focus on the bigger picture style thing. Sokka and Arnook get to talk, and so he apologizes, of course, for not being able to protect Yue, but Arnook understands. You know, she always made her own choices. I do feel this was slightly better in the original as well, just because I like the sense from Arnook where he always had that destiny sense about Yue, that it was a miracle that he got to have his daughter for as long as he did, but that he always knew that this was probably something that was likely to happen, that in some big moment that favor would need to be repaid in a way. And he is proud of his daughter for doing that and saving the tribe basically in that way, her sacrifice. And that came across pretty well. It's still mostly here, but I think the specifics of the scene in the original could have all been incorporated in here. Sokka, and I actually like the Sokka aspect of this. I think it's pretty good for his character arc. He feels that he did nothing. Because he wasn't involved in the battle and he didn't get to protect Yue, so he feels like a complete failure. But Arnook notes that, you know, you were there for her during this, like, monumental moment for her where she knew she had to make this sacrifice. You being there as that kind of moment of kind of comfort for her, someone that she was, like, really cared about next to her as it happened, really gave her the confidence to do her destiny, basically. You have to look at it that way. That, yes, you might not feel that you were the warrior you needed to be in the scene, but you don't always have to be a warrior. You could be a hero. And I like that in a way, kind of as the resolution for Book 1, Sokka's arc. Of Team Avatar, he is the one of the trio that the arc is the most clearly done, because across the multiple episodes you did get to see different angles on this, because you highlighted the responsibility Hakoda gave him and the effort he puts in to protect the tribe. Then we got to see, with the Mechanist, the inventor side of things, that he could go down that path. But then he wants to be a leader. He wants to be a warrior. And he learns from Suki to be a better warrior, and that she thinks he can be a warrior. But that there is that inventing side of things. So it's not focused on that. But then the past, reflecting on the past where his father felt he's not suited to be a warrior. But he's grown since that moment. And we build up to here where we see that he is skilled. You saw how good of a warrior and leader he was in the opening scene of the episode, taking down the ship. But here's this other side to him of just the kind of more personal connection to people, helping people. And it's just that idea of like, yes, maybe you are not destined to be a warrior, but you could be a hero. And then what is a hero? It's like a bit of everything. I kind of do like that. I'm not going to say it's the best arc ever, but of the three main characters, not that aren't Zuko, obviously, I think this comes across reasonably well, because it's not mind-numbingly repetitive, and it had something to it, at the very least. Then we have the Pakku Katara scene as sort of the kind of Katara resolution. So they both reflect on the loss that has happened here, but that the Water Tribe will rebuild and come out stronger. Water is the element of change, and he sort of forgot that in everything that happened here. And it was only through Katara that he was reminded of that, like, yes, I, like water, need to change with the times, basically. And so he wants her to help him to train new waterbenders, but she decides, no, I have to help Aang on his journey. And it obviously gets brought up that, like, you know, you are going to be the best master for Aang. He has the best master he could ever ask for, effectively. So this is doubling down on the whole idea that even Pakku, I guess, considers her to be a master, which is not ideal. I do wish they would have just introduced the idea that, like, at the end here, he will do some final bits of training with Katara to properly make her a master. Then she will train Aang, because I guess Pakku was just like, no, I think Aang is the sort of person where he needs to be very, very close to the people who trains him. So it has to be you. They could have made a bit of a plot point out of that, but this one just doesn't quite come together properly, just because, you know, no official training really to get to the level of master. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Of course, they'll grow together over the years in between books, and like she'll become better just in that sense. But I think it would have really helped to just mention the idea of her doing some training with Pakku. He gives her the spirit water, and it's basically an invitation to return any time, because the setup here is basically that it seems like the team is planning to leave like immediately, because again, they're going to have to do something different in between books here, because there's going to be like a 3-year time skip or something like that between books, just because of how the age of the actors. So they're going to have to acknowledge that it doesn't seem like they're just going to stay in the Northern Water Tribe for like 3 years doing all the training. No, it seems like they're going to get back on the road and do the training, Aang and Katara, on their own, but that they can come back to the north if they need to. So interesting. Kind of resolution with Iroh and Zuko is just, obviously we have a Zuko who is completely lost in thought because he has lost his hope. Finding the Avatar brought hope because he felt that bringing the Avatar back to Ozai would restore his honor and he'd be welcomed back home. But now he knows that's not a possibility. And in fact, they're actively just using him to improve each other, and they don't really care about him. And so where does that leave Zuko here? He is completely lost in so many ways. He has grown as well. And so it kind of highlights the idea that finally he will just rest, because what else is he meant to do? He just has to, wake up and figure out what to do next, and like what is his destiny after this. And this is going to be the setup for the very interesting Zuko Book 2 arc. So pretty decent way to end it here. I also like that they do mention the crew a little bit here, but we'll see if the crew gets brought back into things at all. I'm guessing G we'll see again at some point, whereas I think the original G, I don't think we see again in Book 2 or 3. But anyway, Then we're getting into the final couple of scenes here. So, of course, Aang is upset at the destruction caused to Agnikela. He feels he's failed. The team tries to console him that, it's the Fire Nation's fault. It's not yours. You need to focus on what now needs to be done, basically. Focus on the future, not the past. And this reminds him that he now understands what Gyatso was trying to tell him. Let go of the past or he will never have a future. And so he is going to move on from that and kind of have faith in himself, kind of forgive himself in a way. And so, yeah, the idea again is Katara is going to teach Aang waterbending. After that, they'll go to Omashu for earthbending training with Bumi, and the team is together. So obviously, because of what happens in the next scene, this is obviously going to be completely altered. So we don't even know how the start of book 2 might go. We'll get to that in an upcoming video. But anyway, what does happen next is the Great Sage talks to Ozai about, the attack on the north, that it failed, we lost a lot of troops. But Ozai's like, nah, it doesn't matter. It was only ever a distraction. The true target was Omashu. As it's revealed that Bumi has been captured, Omashu is now under Fire Nation control, and it was Azula who was the one who was instrumental in leading the Fire Nation to victory at the attack on Omashu. So that's kind of cool. I like that we actually got to see that in between seasons, that the reveal doesn't have to be we go over the ridge and we see Omashu has fallen. It actually has a bigger impact that we were there for quite a while. They were preparing for an attack and now we see that it has fallen. So that's quite interesting. And then the question comes up with Zuko. They're like, oh, he might have been lost at the attack on the north as well. How do you feel about this, Fire Lord? And he says, if Zuko is strong, he'll survive. If not, you sacrifice the weak to keep yourself strong. So that's the point there. There was a little bit of emotion in Ozai when the implication that maybe Zuko had died came up. But he of course went back to what seems to be his mantra about the idea of strength is the important thing to him, not being weak. So we'll see what they do with that as we go forward. And then the final scene is about setting up the comet's return. The Great Sage shows Ozai this contraption where they have mostly figured out when the comet is going to return. So he basically says, after 100 years, we finally know that the comet is very soon going to arrive. They don't give an exact time on it, but I think logically it makes sense that it's going to probably be somewhere in the region of 3 to 5 years or something like that. It depends on a few things, but of course, because of when season 2 is going to have to be filmed, you assume it's going to have to be at least 2 or 3 years. And then if they only get around to the comet after another year of filming, it's going to have to be, like I said, 3 to 5 years they probably put in for the comet here to make it work. It certainly can't be like 9 months like the original, or maybe revealing it at the end of the book like 6 months to the comet, because the actors' ages would just not be taken into account in that way. So that's all fine. The final point I'd make here is just that I'm not sure exactly how this contraption works or what exactly we were necessarily seeing, but you did sort of see a point at which it seemed like we sort of saw the eclipse happen. There was the point where like the moon crossed over what I guess is maybe meant to be the sun, but I'm not really sure if that's what was being shown. But it might have been an interesting thing if they're just so focused on the comet they maybe hadn't seen the eclipse, because obviously we're setting up the idea of, when is the gang going to find out this information? The library makes a lot of sense, especially because we didn't touch on the library like at all, apart from we actually got to see Wan Shi Tong. But we'll see what they do with the library and Aang finding out about the comet, if the eclipse is going to be a plot point. I assume it has to be. That would be a weird thing to drop. But interesting enough way to end the season. And there's a few bookmarks going on here, of course. We started the show with Sozin distracting the Earth Kingdom to attack the Air Nation, the Air Temples. And of course, we started with the first Sozin's Comet, basically. And we end the show with Ozai doing a distraction to take out somewhere else, and the idea that the comet is going to return. So that's kind of clever writing overall. But that is the end of Netflix Avatar Season 1. So yeah, interesting stuff. This episode in particular, like I said, it is mostly like relatively good because the finale material is in general very good material. There are little changes the whole way through that I think just take things away from it. Certain moments that are good, like Han being different, I think is actually quite good. The Azula's Zhao connection was always pretty decent. But other bits and pieces definitely are nowhere near as good as the original. And that's kind of my general thoughts on the show. There's a overall pretty decent quality level, I think, for the show, where it's rarely amazing, but it's also rarely bad. It's just most of the time in this solid to relatively good level on a scene-to-scene basis. Room for improvement, certainly, and you would want them to improve for the coming seasons. And I think they should be able to improve. Take feedback on board and come out into season 2 and 3 in a much better position here. Probably the big thing they need to do is just very much rework and think a lot more about the Katara arc, Aang arc, Sokka arc, and just make that come together in a better way. Characterize them better. Like, what did you do well with Zuko, and why can't you do any of that with, some of the other characters? That's the big question I would have. Katara should be in a better position, much more confident as a master for book 2, so that should be better. I just hope they don't bog Aang's arc down in too much mentioning responsibility for the next season. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on episode 8 of Netflix Avatar Legends. But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.